Universalist Church, building community, inspiring growth, creating change. Here in the heart of Kansas City, we come together to create this hour of shared reflection so that we might be renewed in courage for these times and inspired to lives of greater dignity, higher purpose, deeper generosity, and more effective action. If you are new to Unitarian Universalism or to our congregation, we want to get to know you and share a part of your journey. If this place is already your spiritual home, welcome once more. We need one another, and it is good to be together again. Through the gifts of technology, we also gather virtually to celebrate community and connections as we lean into the values of justice, compassion, and reason. Welcome to all those who are joining us in this way today. Together, we learn the love that has the power to overcome both loneliness in the heart and oppression in the world. Welcome to our service this morning. May the words and music and images that we offer today nourish our best selves, calling forth abundant wisdom and love.
Arise, O souls, arise.
Good morning. I'm Beth Andes, a member of All Souls, not David Jackal, although we're frequently Press the button again. Okay.
No.
Can you tap it, Mika? Oh, nope. What? Grab the chalice. Grab the chalice. Turn it on. Yeah, it is.
It's on.
There you go.
Okay, once again with feeling. Yeah, well, that's what my piano teacher used to say. Put more Beth into it. All right. Anyway, I'm Beth Andes, not David Jackal, a member of All Souls, and it's my privilege to welcome everybody here today on this nice, beautiful, sunny winter day. I echo now the welcome statement in the video for those here and those watching online. When we say welcome here at All Souls, we welcome you. You, with all the identities that you hold, in your fullness as a person. You are welcome here. We hope that you will bring your whole self to this time together. We welcome those who have long been part of our community and those who are here for the first time. Please extend this welcome through conversations with new faces after the service. A lot of them may be wearing paper name tags, so that's a way to figure that out. It may be the start of a long and warm relationship.
On this first Sunday of Black History Month, we honor the many stories of the past and present, both silent and known. We bring into our hearts all those who have gone before, all those whose living in this world has prepared the soil for our living, all those whose being has enabled our being. In the words of my colleague Karen Johnston, let us practice holding collective memories that might otherwise slip into that enormous void that sucks at and corrodes any future we hold dear. Let us practice honoring truth-telling up from the past that must come fully into the now, lest we falter, fail, lest the whole remain in pieces. Let not our need for comfort or simplicity, for easy forgiveness or false pardon, smother the heartbreak that still needs healing. Let us also remember those whose existence is seated in our lives today, not only those who are our physical descendants, but also those whose spirits inherit the love we sow, the hope we replant, the promise we harvest. It is good that we gather. Come, let us worship together.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Shawn, and I light this chalice for justice, equity, and compassion in all human relations.
Please stand as you are able and willing, and join in the affirmation of our covenant, and then remain standing as we sing our opening song. Together, we affirm, goodwill is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
Could I ask the young and young at heart to come forward? We have a story for all ages. So today we're going to hear the story of the frustrated wolf. Once upon a time, there was a wolf who absolutely loved the great outdoors. He loved running through the woods. He loved howling at the moon on the nights when it was a big, shining, round ball in the dark. But most of all, the wolf dearly loved his garden. Ever since he was just a cub, he'd gone to sleep every night, peacefully nestled among the fragrant flowers in his well-tended yard. By day, the wolf would faithfully tend every colorful blossom, removing the dead leaves and bugs, watering each plant just the right amount, taking joy in watching his beautiful garden thrive under his loving care. By night, when he wasn't running through the woods or howling at the moon, he would watch over his garden. Because in the woods, you can never be too careful. Yep, life was pretty great for our friend the wolf, except for one little problem. Actually, 3 little problems. The 3 little pigs who lived nearby, they were terrible neighbors. When they got hungry and the wolf was out doing the things wolves do, pigs would sneak in and eat the flowers out of his garden. Yep, the wolf tried everything he could to think of how to keep them away. He begged and he pleaded, trying to appeal to their better piggy nature, but to no avail. So he built a fence to keep them out. When that didn't work, he built a super tall hedge, thinking that now his neighbors would eat the flowers when pigs could fly. But somehow they must have crawled underneath or in between, because the 3 little pigs still got in. He was the resourceful wolf, because his next idea was to put barbed wire throughout the garden and cameras aimed right at his poor flowers, the ones that were left. Finally, when that didn't work, the wolf had what he thought was a brilliant idea. Yep, he installed a scarecrow with a bright red scarf around its neck that would surely get the pig's attention. But nope, evening after evening, the wolf would return to his garden, only to find it once again ravaged by his determined neighbors, the 3 little pigs. Finally, the wolf had had enough. He just couldn't take it anymore, so he went out to blow the pigs' houses down and force them out of the neighborhood. Oh, one of the pigs built his house out of straw. That one was easy. One good puff, and down it came. Another of the pigs had built his house out of wood. That one was easy too. It actually took a couple of puffs, maybe even 3, but that house too was blown away. Unfortunately, the 3rd pig had built his house out of brick. The first 2 pigs had moved in with him, all the better to venture forth together on frequent flower feast forays. The wolf tried his best. He huffed and he puffed, he huffed and he puffed, then he huffed and he puffed some more, and he just could not blow that house down. Pigs never did stop eating the flowers in the wolf's garden. Sometimes they picked or even uprooted a few and brought them home to decorate their sturdy brick house. Sometimes the wolf sat outside in the moonlight, pondering life in the woods without the joy of a beautiful, fragrant, uneaten garden. The end. Now, how many of you recognize that story? Yep, it was told from a different point of view, right? Story of the 3 little pigs. This time the pigs weren't the main character in the story. This time it was the wolf. And you know, it can be strange to hear a story we all know so well from a different point of view. with a different character at the center. And we might even notice ourselves starting to feel annoyed when hearing the story told so differently from the way we were taught it. But today's service is going to be all about the stories we listen to, the stories we tell, and who gets to decide the right way to tell stories about ourselves, our faith, our country. Because sometimes, if we change the way we tell stories, we can change the world around us too. So now you shall go off to your classroom. Shall we sing the children to their classes?
The following words are from Mark Morrison Reed. The central task of the religious community is to unveil the bonds that bind us all, each to all, There is a connectedness, a relationship discovered, and the particulars of our own lives and the lives of others once felt inspires us to act for justice. It is the church that assures us that we are not struggling for justice on our own, but as members of a larger community. The religious community is essential, for alone our vision is too narrow to see all that must be seen, and our strength too limited to do all that must be done. Together, our vision widens and our strength is renewed. Our community deserves our support. The offering will now be given and gratefully received. Thank you, Daniel. What a delight to have you. Join with me now, please, as we read the dedication of the offering. We dedicate our offerings and our actions to the mission at the heart of this congregation, to build a respectful, caring community, to inspire personal and spiritual growth, and to create change toward a just and compassionate society.
Good morning. Good morning. Today's reading is an excerpt from the book, The Invention of Yesterday, by African-American author Tamim Ansary. Even as we grow ever more intertwined, we stay ever more resolutely distinct from one another as groups. We live on the same planet, but in many different worlds. What any of us humans see as the whole world is just the world as we see it, whoever the we might be. How many more worlds exist? Well, that depends on how many collections of people on Earth think of themselves as a we, distinct from other. And two historical narratives might have the same events and yet be different stories entirely, as we learned from our children's story this morning, because the shape of the narrative depends on the teller of the tale. And the shape of the narrative is what it all comes down to in the end. History deals in facts, of course, but in history, those facts fundamentally serve a narrative. When we construct our story, we're inventing ourselves. That's what we were doing in those caves long ago, gathered around the fire, passing on to our children what we remembered about our grandparents, great-grandparents, reminiscing about life-changing adventures we'd shared, arguing about which of us really killed that woolly mammoth, and we drew conclusions about the meaning of life from the stars we saw above. For when ancient folks gazed at the night sky, they didn't just see stars. They saw whole constellations. They said, see, there's a bear. Look, over there, right over there. Looks like a mighty hunter. And their companions nodded. Because as long as everybody in the group saw the bear, saw the mighty hunter, they were there. We all want to be part of something bigger than ourselves, but that something bigger has never yet been humanity as a whole. The trajectory looks like it's moving from many to one, but trajectory alone cannot tell us if that's really where this story is headed. Especially since we most certainly aren't one big happy family yet, or one big anything, for that matter. So to get any inkling on the road ahead, we have to take a look at the road that stretches behind us. How did we get from where we were to where we are? If ever-increasing interconnectedness is the through line, what's the shape of the narrative so far? If history is the story we're telling one another, what's its plot?
There's a light in the darkness, though the night is black as my skin. There's a light burning bright, showing me the way. But I know where I've been. There's a cry in the distance. It's a voice that comes from deep within. There's a cry the answers up ahead. 'Cause I know where I've been. There's a road we've been traveling, lost so many along the way, but the riches will be plenty, worth the price we have to pay. There's a dream in the future. There's a struggle that we have yet to end. And there's pride in my heart to lift us to tomorrow. 'Cause just to sit would be a sin. I'll give thanks to my God, 'cause I know where I've been.
Many of us have missed out on things we really, really wanted to do, but didn't because of COVID. I was more excited than you can imagine about a long-awaited event about a year ago. If I'd only felt safe attending. This was the opening of the new Steven Spielberg version of West Side Story. Already delayed for over a year because of the pandemic, and, well, happily, I finally did get to see it. One of 4 moviegoers in the theater on an early Tuesday afternoon at the very end of its run. So obviously I was pretty determined. That's because, as a kid, I was absolutely obsessed with the original 1961 movie. Within the first couple of years it was out, I saw it more than 30 times. 30. And this was long before I had a driver's license, so my parents became increasingly less enthusiastic. I loved the tragic love story. With the setting, the dancing, the music, most definitely the music. In fact, I loved West Side Story so much that when I got an assignment to present a special project to my 6th grade class on the subject of my choice, I chose West Side Story. Now, it may occur to you that movie, no matter how special, is not really in itself a subject for academic exploration. That the presentation might end up like a movie review, no actual point. And that did occur to me, but I didn't care. I just wanted to share the wonder of this movie, to describe the story, to offer some background about its creation and production, show some slides, and most of all, share a few of my favorite songs from my well-worn vinyl album with the help of the school's AV department. I thought I might get away with this because I was one of Mrs. Browning's favorites. But the evening after my presentation, my mother got a call from a very unhappy Mrs. C. Turns out the problem wasn't the lack of a point. The problem was one of the songs I chose to play for the class. It was deemed inappropriate. You might think she was upset about her Krupke. You know, my sister wears a mustache, my brother wears a dress. 61 after all. Not to mention the oh-so-suggestive G off at Krupke at the end. Oh. The song my teacher found inappropriate for the class was America, with verse after ironic verse crying racial discrimination facing. Remember, life is all right in America if you're all white in America. And this ran counter to the narrative we've always been taught in our all-white middle-class school. It was inappropriate that we be exposed to a part of American story that for us had always been silent. How ironic is it that with only a couple of years, the civil rights movement would be making headlines? And appropriate or not, tragic parts of that missing story would be forcibly revealed to us by voices that refuse to stay silent. Now, over 50 years later, that revelation and the reaction to its unsilencing has only intensified. The awareness that the American narrative we've all been taught to believe is at the very least not the whole story, certainly not the objective true story, and is in fact a very damaging story. That awareness has finally escaped its comfortable home in academia and leftist political circles and burst into mainstream American consciousness, where many find it to be worse than inappropriate, in fact, downright subversive. Subversive to suggest that American institutions, traditions, and ideals were created and evolved and continue to exist within a culture of white supremacy at its very foundation. Not surprisingly, that interpretation has further divided an already deeply divided country. Not even our cherished historical traditions can escape the questions about truth and meaning, power and oppression. At Thanksgiving, do we celebrate a wondrous coming together of grateful pilgrims and welcoming Indians and a harvest feast, symbolizing the bounty of this God-ordained city on the hill yet to be built? Or do we mourn this ominous encounter with the people of the land, grieve with those who would suffer displacement and disease and genocide? And who gets to decide what story will continue to be handed down to future generations? I've been interested in the book by Tamim Ansary, who was an author of our reading today, an African-American author and public speaker. The book has the ambitious title of The Invention of Yesterday, a 50,000-year history of human culture, conflict, and connection. His premise is that if our species is going to survive, societies have to be able to find a common narrative in which everyone can see themselves. That we're all part of this common story seen through a multicultural lens. In his study of human history, he's uncovered patterns of culture and conflict across time and geography, and he describes a pattern that helps explain what's happening in America now. When a society is more or less stable, all the experiences or data that challenge the prevailing narrative are put away on a shelf. They're considered irrelevant. Maybe interesting data to be looked at someday by someone who cares, but for the time being, almost nobody cares, at least not in the public consciousness. But when things stop working well, when trouble continues to arise, then some people start to look at those supposedly irrelevant facts and start to say, wait, maybe that's not so irrelevant after all. Maybe that explains a lot. And the predominant, previously unquestioned narrative starts breaking down. as it does people who have been marginalized or victimized over the course of that history, now start to openly question the prevailing narrative and say, you know what? That story doesn't fit me. I don't recognize the character that's supposed to be me. And they start to tell a different story. When that different story proves to be damaging to the traditional narrative, there is active resistance. Consider the reaction to the 1619 Project, published by the New York Times over 3 years ago, and by the way, now available as a 6-part adaptation on Hulu. An investigative journalist and staff writer, Nicole Hannah-Jones, led the development of a multimedia project making the claim that the moment in 1619 when the kidnapped Africans arrived in the English colonies enslaved could rightfully be considered the origin of the United States. Enslavement, according to this view, shaped our traditions and institutions and has left an enduring legacy of racial inequity. The initial pushback centered on one line in Hannah-Jones's introduction, where she stated that one of the primary reasons the colonists decided to declare their independence from Britain was that they wanted to protect the institution of slavery. The Times declined to correct that line, but they did agree to clarify it, to say truthfully that protecting slavery was one of the primary reasons for some of the colonists. And while it was inevitable that some politicians would get involved, Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas declared that the project threatened the integrity of the Union by denying the true principles on which it was founded. Then President Trump called it a crusade against America, toxic propaganda, ideological poison that could dissolve the civic bonds that tie us together, apparently stated completely without irony.
Sorry.
Now, in 2023, 7 states have passed legislation banning the teaching in publicly funded schools of the principles regarding systemic racism set forth in the 1619 Project. 16 states are currently considering such bills, including Missouri. Missouri State Senator Barbara Washington of Kansas City says the bill is a denial of the history of the ethnic people of the United States of America. Now we're preventing all children from learning anything about the history and the fabric of who we are. In Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis stated that we know why the colonists revolted against Britain, because they told us. They wrote pamphlets. They had committees of correspondence. They wrote a Declaration of Independence. He said, I think we've got to have an education system that is preferring fact over narratives. Fact over narratives. Now let's consider how historical facts are created, because they don't just get reported, they are created. The powerful narrative we call history is created from stories, and those stories contain untold silences. Haitian anthropologist Michel Ralph Trouillot wrote about this in his book, Silencing the Past: Power and the Production of History. He names 4 moments in the historical trajectory where stories are silenced. First, in the creation of what we call facts. Facts aren't abstract and meaningless, they only become historical facts because they matter in some sense to the recorder, to the potential audience within a curated context. And they're not created equal. When facts are created, so necessarily are silences, the actual occurrences that are not noted. Any single event enters history with some of its parts missing, left out while other parts are recorded. And this happens naturally, even when the recorder has no conscious agenda. And just because noting every aspect of an event, even the accessible ones, would make the reporting incomprehensible. Trujillo uses the example of a sportscaster giving a play-by-play account of a baseball game. They tell only about the events that matter to the game, not ones that are peripheral. The audience isn't mentioned except insofar as it's influencing the players. Players on the bench are left out of the narrative. This first accounting of these recorded facts has already created innumerable silences, any of which might have mattered greatly in other contexts, but those missing observances don't matter for finding meaning in this particular game. The second point at which stories are silenced is in the creation of archives and documents, pulling together these recorded sources and facts. This is a process that conveys authority, as it selects the stories that matter. Themes and meanings are chosen, and privilege invariably enters into the process in ways both obvious and unseen. History is once again silenced when the created facts and documents are retrieved by those who craft a narrative from them. And even if we assume there's no agenda here, the events that have been recorded and archived are already filled with created silences. In selecting for a narrative to be written or taught, weight is given depending on which facts are more heavily reported, with more details and depth. The narratives are shaped by access to well-known languages and culture, to literacy, a process that often excludes most of the participants in a historical event. The settling of the American West. The gracious Southern traditions of plantation life. The remarkable establishment of America's first suburban shopping center, the Country Club Plaza. Finally, the combined silences accrued through the first three steps of the process of producing history intermingle and mutually reinforce each other to influence what we receive as worthy of our trust and respect. And so I have to disagree with Ron DeSantis' attempts to suppress the search for stories that have been silenced in the name of having an educational system that prefers facts over narrative. What could that even mean? Celebrations such as Thanksgiving Day, in Trujillo's words, impose a silence upon the events they ignore, and then fill that silence with narratives of power about the event they celebrate. Here's an example from a video I saw recently called Whitewashing American History. And it's a compilation of short clips from some various mid-20th century educational films. The sort of black and white, brief films narrated by an authoritative, deadly earnest male voice, think Beaver Cleaver's dad, that many of us of a certain age were subjected to in school, purporting to teach aspects of American culture or history. And in the video, these short clips are strung together, and each one is introduced by a youthful-sounding 21st century narrator who's equal parts matter-of-fact and outraged, with a much appreciated touch of well-deserved snark. And the clip in question describes the Pilgrims at Plymouth Colony. The solemn voiceover explaining regretfully how at first the settlers had a collectivist system of sharing labor and goods, but that wasn't working. So they changed to a system of private ownership, of self-reliance. The narrator explains glowingly, the fruit of their labor was theirs. No wonder they were willing to work. That's the final scene, and the camera shifts from the beaming actors in pilgrim costumes to a lone dead fish. lying in a cornfield. Our modern-day narrator observes, there's a fish. I wonder how the Pilgrims learned how to plant a fish with their corn. And how did they get corn? You won't learn it from this film. We have a lot to learn. We have much more to unlearn. The purpose of Black History Month is not to be that one time of year set aside when all Americans remember and honor the stories of Black Americans so that we can not pay attention the rest of the year. Black History Month is here for two reasons: to tell the truth about the contributions of African Americans in order to correct the traditional narrative, and just as importantly, to lift up their own story for Black Americans so they might know their own strength and importance. Until we're able to do that, not just every February, but forevermore, the moral injury to all of us of slavery, Jim Crow, and their aftermath will continue. Moral injury happens when stories of trauma continue to be silenced over and over, compounding the original harm to everyone involved. Carter G. Woodson, the Black educator who initiated what was originally called Negro History Week in 1926, said his crusade was much more than an anti-lynching movement, because there would be no lynching if it did not start in the schoolroom. And he wrote, "Why devote all this time in history class to Europe, descendants of Europeans, and not give equal time to the origins of Africans?" And I remember Tamim Ansary's assertion that in order to survive as a society, we need to find a common narrative, one in which we can all see our own story. And I wonder if maybe we could find a way to tell the American story, not through the European perspective, but telling it as our story, the story of all of us, with all of its tragedy and nobility and violence, all of its generosity and suffering and ignorance. And it wouldn't be, here's what we did to them, but what we did as a people with and to and for each other, for better and for worse. A human story of ordinary and extraordinary humans still struggling together toward an ever-elusive wholeness. An African proverb says, "Until the lions tell the story, tales of the hunt will always glorify the hunters." It is said that it's because the lions have no voice, no historians, even though they are every bit as much part of the tale. We, living in America, will have a story in which we can all see ourselves, a story of us, only when we listen for the silences of our history and honor them as the missing pieces of a story and a people not yet made whole. May it be so. Would you join me now in singing?
Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound, where I'm bound. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound. There There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. Where I'm bound, where I'm bound. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land where I'm bound. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land where I'm bound, where I'm bound. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land where I'm bound.
Not all stories can be told in an hour. Not everything can be learned or saved or forgiven. But let us remember that this is how we begin, moment by moment, making our lives one choice, one spark of hope, one willing yes at a time. Be well. Go in peace.